Hello enthusiasts and welcome to this new video from the website www.moonwatch.fr. So, today I am going to introduce you to an icon of watchmaking, perhaps even the most famous watch in the world. It is the Rolex Submariner, in its 16610 version. Let's start with a bit of history on this Rolex Submariner 16610. The automatic Rolex Submariner 16610 is the most well-known and coveted diving watch in the world. An undisputed icon, the Submariner is the most copied watch model in the world. Its design is timeless, making it sought after by young men as well as slightly older individuals. Initially designed for diving, the first Rolex Submariner was introduced to the public at the Swiss Watch Fair. Immediately, the model captivated the public, as it was the first watch with a water resistance of 100 meters. Part of the Rolex Oyster Professional Collection, its unidirectional rotating bezel is graduated over 60 minutes, and its cyclops make it a benchmark diving watch. A descendant of the original Rolex Submariner, the Rolex Submariner reference 16610, produced from 1989, is considered by many fans as the last of the best submariners. It retains the lines of previous models while being the first sub to use the caliber 3135, a manufacturer caliber, Rolex of course. Finally, this Rolex 16610 is the last diving watch in the Submariner range to use an aluminum bezel and a 40mm case. Clearly, this vintage Rolex 16610 is the first diving watch in the Submariner range to use an aluminum bezel and a 40mm case. It is a must-have in any enthusiast's collection, and even more so in the collection of a fan of the brand with the crown. Let's now move on to the technical specifications. The model I am presenting to you today is the Rolex model, Oyster Perpetual Submariner 16610. It is a watch that was produced between 1989 and 2010. So, a little over 20 years of production, a significant production. It is a watch intended for men, but it is unisex. A woman could wear it as the 40mm diameter fits perfectly. The case is made of steel, as is the bracelet. The watch houses a Rolex caliber 3135 with 31 jewels, which oscillates at 28,800 beats per hour. The power reserve offered by this manufacturer caliber is 48 hours. The watch's water resistance is rated for 300 meters. The unidirectional bezel has 120 clicks. There is a screwed down and signed crown. It's negligible, the small crown. The glass is sapphire crystal. However, it is a glass without anti-reflective coating. For the dimensions, we have a diameter of 40mm or 2 diameters, thus for 12 meters thickness. The bracelet is an oyster steel bracelet. The lug width is 20 millimeters. The reference number is 16610, and as a complication, we find the date at 3 o'clock. First of all, the case of the Rolex Submariner 16610 has almost perfect dimensions, with a diameter of 40mm and a thickness of 12mm. So we have a watch that can suit both a man and a woman. Entirely made of stainless steel, the case is more resistant to scratches, shocks, and corrosion than the older Rolex cases, which used 316L steel. The use of 904L steel in the 1980s revolutionized the design of diving watches. Like its predecessors, the bezel is unidirectional. It is a 1 to 20 click bezel, making it very pleasant to use. You can feel a slight resistance. You can tell it's not just for show. So there you go. Obviously, unidirectional. Thus, in case of an impact during a dive, there is no loss of time or distorted dive time. It's quite traditional now, everyone knows how a dive bezel works. On this bezel, which is engraved with a 60-minute scale. There is a marking from 0 to 15 minutes, then a marker every 5 minutes thereafter. On this Rolex 16610, the insert is made of aluminum. And by the way, this will be the last production to have an aluminum insert, as Rolex will subsequently replace it with Cerachrome inserts. Personally, I prefer an aluminum bezel because it develops a patina. You see, on my model, the bezel has slightly turned blue and is starting to blue over time, which makes the watch simply unique. A little information as well, the unidirectional bezel was patented by Blancpain in 1983 and not by Rolex. Blancpain had patented it for the 50 fathoms, which is considered the first true diving watch. So no, it's not Rolex. Sorry for the crown fans. Regarding the crown, precisely, we find a crown with a grip offering a good hold. The crown is screwed down and signed with the Rolex crown and the 3 small dots below. This crown allows for easy adjustment of the date and of course the time. Finally, we will look at the case back, which is quite traditional at Rolex. It's a case back without any inscription, so a blank case back. It is screwed down and ensures water resistance up to 300 meters while protecting the movement. Even though few people dare to dive with their Submariner, this Rolex C610 is a true diving watch, just like a Seiko or an Oris or other diving watches. This Rolex is therefore a diving watch, a true diving watch, but it's true that given the price of the watch, we all prefer to splash around with a $100 G-Shock. We'd have fewer qualms about banging it up or losing it. It remains a true diving watch, which is why Rolex uses a glossy black dial with white indices and hands. Glossy dials replace matte dials, which appeared in the 80s, with glossy dials replacing matte dials. Because the look in Ibichis is more contrasted and it remains more readable underwater. So the glossy dial provides better readability, even underwater. We also find small white markers, a railroad track, whoop, to represent the minutes. I'll try to zoom in for you, though it's always a bit tricky with Rolex. Because since there is no anti-reflective coating, I'll first clean the crystal. As there is no anti-reflective coating, as soon as my spotlight is on it, I'll get reflections, so I'll turn off the spotlight. There we go, I don't know if this will be better. A railroad track to mark the minutes can be found on this dial. Yeah, it might not necessarily be better. Well, let's turn it back on, never mind the reflections. We find on this dial several inscriptions, notably Rolex Oyster Perpetual, date with the crown below 12 o'clock, then Submariner, 300 meters. Superlative, officially certified chronometer above the 6 o'clock. And finally, the Swiss T less than 25. A relatively important mention on these models, as it shows that it's the last dial that used tritium. So there you go, we also find a date dial traditionally located at 3 o'clock. The hands, nothing extravagant on this side, as they are Mercedes-type hands, which are the hallmark of the Rolex Submariner. Until 1998, Rolex used tritium, hence the Swiss T less than 25, which was much safer than the radium used in the 50s and 60s. Nevertheless, tritium remains radioactive, which is why you can read Swiss T less than 25 under the 6 o'clock index. It should be noted that unlike its successor, unlike the 1166610, the Poirehout of the Rolex Submariner 16610 is not engraved. And by the way, I prefer it not to be engraved. I find that it detracts less from the watch's aesthetics. I find it more harmonious. Well, on the new ones, the Rehaut is engraved. You find Rolex all around, and the serial number is here. It remains relatively discreet. It's still fine craftsmanship. Let's not kid ourselves. To protect this dial, Rolex uses a sapphire crystal without any anti-reflective treatment, which is quite rare for a Swiss manufacturer. Especially in these price ranges, you take Panerai Omega, They all offer anti-reflective or double anti-reflective sapphires. Even at Rolex, they don't treat the crystal. It's a choice that enhances the vintage aspect of the watch at the expense of readability, you see. It catches all the reflections from the spotlight. Well, there you go. At Rolex, that's how it is. You should know that Rolex is actually starting to change its policy a little bit. And I think, I won't say anonymously, but I believe that on the new models up, we are starting to have an anti-reflective treatment on the glass. So there you have it in relation to this context. To this day, the automatic movement housed in the Rolex Submariner 16610 is considered one of the best calibers in the world. Designed in-house, this Swiss Rolex 3135 caliber is an automatic chronometer movement with a quick set date feature. Robust, it uses 31 jewels and is equipped in many references of the brand with the crown. An evolution of the 3000 series, the caliber. The 3135 caliber has evolved to offer a frequency of 21,800 beats per hour and a power reserve of 48 hours. A quick set function allows the date to be advanced using only the winding crown in its second position. Rightly so. The Rolex 3135 caliber is a true technological evolution. It features a microstellar regulating device with a balance wheel, Glucido and the Nivarox hairspring. With this automatic movement 3135, Rolex confirms its supremacy in the world of watchmaking. The mechanism is Korsky certified, it is functional, robust, and extremely reliable. In this spirit, it is recognized as one of the best calibers ever made, and it continues to impress even today, despite being a caliber that is several decades old. This caliber is probably the most solid caliber, the toughest of diving watches. It truly is the benchmark, much like the watch itself. It is the reference watch in diving. When we talk about diving watches, the first thing that comes to mind is the Rolex Submariner. Obviously, it's not the first. Regarding the oyster bracelet of this Rolex Submariner 16610, its reputation is well established. The Swiss manufacturer has been using this 3-link flat bracelet since the 50s, 60s. 50, 60. Overall, it's a bracelet that is elegant and understated. The oyster bracelet uses ultra-resistant 904L steel. The clasp system, which I will show you later, is signed from the Crown Rolex, and it ensures a perfect fit of the watch on the wrist, just like on the Yema GMT. Superman, which I reviewed for you on the Moonwatch site. By the way, I invite you to check out that review. On the Yema, the bracelet has a quick extension to allow the watch to be worn over a diving suit. We are really in the spirit of a diving watch, even if few people actually dive with it. Anyway, there are computers, etc. Now, diving computers. But the fact is that this extension allows you to add maybe a little less than a centimeter to the bracelet without having to disassemble everything, which is relatively practical for putting on the watch over the diving suit. In terms of the bracelet, this oyster is very good. This Rolex oyster is very good, but I have two complaints about it. First, I find it not necessarily suitable for small wrists, despite the clasp adjustment and the removal of links. I'll show you. Here is for my wrist. I have a wrist of 17.5, 18 I would say. First, I have a link delta between the two parts of the bracelet. The issue is that I can't remove a link here because I'm already at the last level. As a result, I didn't have much choice and I had to play with the clasp, the quick adjustment at the clasp. So that's a bit unfortunate because in the end I find myself with a bracelet that isn't necessarily centered on my wrist. I'll show you. There, you see my clasp. It's not centered, slightly off to this side. That's a bit unfortunate. Well, maybe by changing the bracelet to another oyster, it would compensate for the problem. But I really wanted to keep the bracelet. Sorry, the original one with the glide lock clasp. So, well, there you go. That's my first complaint. The second complaint I have to make is that I find this bracelet, Oyster Rolex, too light. I would have appreciated if it were a slightly heavier bracelet to give a feeling of solidity, of robustness. Here, the bracelet is so light, I feel like I'm wearing a dress watch. Honestly, it's quite unsettling. Well, after all, these aren't really disadvantages, it's a personal feeling. Throughout the school, the Rolex S610 is pleasant to wear and to look at. Honestly, I never get tired of looking at this dial. It's a deer that is starting to turn blue. I find it just magnificent. You never get tired of admiring it. And then, moreover, the 12mm thickness simply makes this watch perfect on the wrist. Look at how the watch sits. There are very, very few people who can boast of having a fit on the wrist of this quality. Here, we are talking about a watch that costs almost 10,000 euros, maybe even a bit more now. We must not forget that there are other diving watches of very, very good quality, like for example the Glycine Combat Sub Bronze, on which I have already done a video review. Feel free to check it out. It is also a watch that is very, very, very thin and very pleasant to wear, even though it is a bit larger than this Rolex. So that's it regarding the wearing comfort and the bracelet. Given the fact that it is almost impossible to buy a Rolex Submariner in store or from an official distributor, thank you Rolex and its consumer disrespecting commercial policy. Well, I'm starting to have a bit of a grudge against official sellers, and this commercial policy from Rolex is starting to... It deserves a bit. Let's say they are speculation sellers, ultimately. So it's a bit of a shame because we lose the purchasing aspect. Passion for buying speculation, that's a shame. I buy watches to wear them, to enjoy them. It's not to lock them away for years with the aim of making a profit. So, well, there you go, little aside finished. Today, the easiest way to get a Rolex Submariner, any version, but especially the 71610, is to browse the listings on the grey market. Prices can vary from simple to double depending on the models, depending on the set that is provided, if it has its papers, if it's the model, gold, not gold, etc. You should know that a Rolex S610 in good condition on Oyster can be negotiated. At 9,000 euros, you will be able to find one. Some exceptional models or those with papers can even reach 15,000 euros or more. Moreover, this premium is not necessarily justified, as there are many dive watches just as high quality as the Sub at much lower prices. The only thing is, of course, it's a Rolex. It's the legendary model from Rolex. So the codes are soaring. What I can tell you is that in any case, for high-end models, papers are not essential and everyone will have their own opinion on this. Personally, I don't have any full-set Rolex. My Rolex watches are either bare or only with the box. If I have the papers, so much the better. If I don't, it's not a big deal. In any case, you should expect an additional cost of 300 to 1,000 euros for the papers, for a full-set model, for example. As a general rule, it's better to choose a reputable seller, even if the price is less attractive. At the price of a Rolex Submariner S610, it's better not to make a mistake. You shouldn't tempt fate and must be sure of the reliability and authenticity of the timepiece. And the consistency of the elements. That too, obviously. A watch that has been serviced by Rolex might be worth a little less for many reasons. Changes to the hands, the dial, the bezel, etc. Regarding the packaging, you can find everything. It can range from a simple Rolex box to the service display once again. No real preference, although one must admit that having the Rolex box corresponding to the Submariner, well, it enhances the pleasure. Personally, I know I like to display the boxes visibly on a shelf with the watches inside. I find myself spending hours looking at them. Honestly, I love it. Well, there you go. It's still a personal choice. Obviously, you should know that if you don't have the box, it's not the end of the world. What matters is having the watch, of course. Our last piece of advice before buying a Rolex Submariner is to ask for the watch's history to know if it is completely original. It is important to check the condition of the movement to be sure, and also to see that it is clean and not rusty. Maintenance at Rolex is very expensive, especially since they replace parts. Afterwards you can go to independents, but it's the same, it has a cost. So it's best to be sure of the watch's purchasability, especially since with these watches we are reaching almost 10,000 euros. At the very least, it would be a shame to buy a watch that requires immediate maintenance. As one might expect, the Rolex Submariner 16610 deserves its reputation as the ultimate reference in terms of a diving watch. Unlike the new versions of the Submariner, this 16610 model has a lot of charm with an aluminum bezel that develops a patina and tritium that also begins to age. Moreover, you can see the luminescent dot on the bezel. It also starts to develop a patina. So yes, it's true that this exceptional Rolex timepiece is not accessible to all budgets. You have to spend more than 9,000, 1,000 euros. It's not necessarily easy to find this model in second-hand shops either. Hence the need to turn to the online market with the risks we know. It's not necessarily reassuring. So take your time to look for one to try it on. You should also know that the new Submariner references are 41mm, so slightly larger. Honestly, they haven't really revolutionized their sub. At Rolex, they didn't put in too much effort, those guys. Even though on the movement there have been notable improvements, including the power reserve. But well, that's another topic. In any case, the most important thing is to enjoy it. If you have this watch within reach, don't leave it in the safe. The purpose of having such a beautiful watch is to wear it. Considering that the Rolex Submariner is the most copied and replicated model in the world. I find it unpleasant, personally, when I wear it, to constantly face the recurring question about its authenticity. Are you sure your Rolex is real, blah blah blah? Of course, I'm sure, I know where I bought it, I know its origin. Well, that's the other criticism I have with Rolex, which is that obviously Rolex is so copied. You should know that for every real Rolex purchased, there are about 25 fake Rolexes sold. So, well, it's a bit of the game when you buy the brand with the crown, but in any case, the purchase should remain a purchase of pleasure, quite simply. Even if all Rolex owners have grown tired of these questions about the legitimacy of their timepiece, and by the way, it's a shame. Regarding the quality of this watch, Rolex, listen, I don't have much to say. I think it justifies the price, even if this price is constantly increasing. So, yes, the price is justified because it's a Rolex, because these watches still remain good investments. Afterwards, I'll tell you honestly, I wouldn't go bankrupt for a Submariner. There are two other beautiful diving watches with robust movements, with ETAs, etc. Even manufacture movements like Oris, which cost barely a few €100. Afterwards, let's not lie to ourselves either. The simple fact of knowing that you have on your wrist an icon of global watchmaking, that confers it's part of the pleasure, and we are happy to have a beautiful Rolex on the wrist. For me, the first one was my second Rolex, the Sub. I had an Explorer 2. You stay still. If I don't taste it before, honestly, I love it. That one, in fact, I hope I never have to sell it because I find it just perfect, well proportioned. Ultra readable. Well, obviously it's a Rolex, that counts. Moreover, it sits well on the wrist. Apart from the two small bracelet issues I mentioned, the weight and the clasp, that is a bit off-center. But there you go. It's just a detail. Credit where credit is due. And this Rolex 16610, it's truly a beautiful piece with great finishes. Perfect. To conclude, I would say it's an excellent Swiss watch. That it should be a selfish pleasure, this watch. It shouldn't be a selfish pleasure, it just begs to be shared, so it must be worn. When the watch catches someone's eye, don't hesitate to talk about it, to share. Honestly, it's truly a pleasure, this watch that I adore. For me, the Submariner Rolex 610, it deserves a place in any collection. So there you have it, the review is coming to an end. Before I leave you, feel free to comment on what you think of this model if you've had it. If you still have it, in which variations, what do you love or what do you hate about this model as well? Because it's true that it remains a myth and there are also many detractors, probably for valid reasons, so feel free to leave a comment. It will allow me to interact a bit with you. I also invite you to visit our website www.moonwatch.fr, where you will find our latest reviews and videos. We are also present on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Moonwatch FR tout collé, you will find us. And above all, subscribe to the channel. This allows us to have a better ranking on YouTube, better visibility, and a growing community to share our common passion, which is watchmaking, of course. With that, I say see you soon in the next video.